Thank you. And I am Jim Marion with Chapman Lindsay, and the best news you're going to hear today is that this is my final meeting as your chairman after 3 years.
When your board stands up and is happy about that, I don't know what kind of sign that is. Thank you.
It's been an honor to serve you, but really it's your board that does such a great job. And one introduction we did not hear is our board member and treasurer, Jay Sinkarik. He has a serious illness, and I think had surgery last week. We ask you to keep Jay in our prayers, and we hope to see him here at the next meeting. Couple of real quick housekeeping items. Your membership renewals for next year, 2017, are coming out, and for the first time in I don't know how long, it's been at least 10 years, we are going to have a small dues increase. We're increasing individual memberships from $250 to $300. Here's how the math works. We have done 2 years in a row $50,000 of original research. We have 100 members. We were at $250. That's $25,000 a year. Staying in our current deal guarantees our bankruptcy, which we're not going to do. So we hope you find these reports an incredible value, $300 for the entire year with the research reports, no charge for the meeting. So look for those memberships. We've made a small change with corporate memberships. They will go from 1,000 to 1,200. You pay for 4, you get 5 memberships, and starting this year, anyone within your organization can come. It does not have to be the same person. So, all right, here's how the format's going to work. I'm going to invite Ginger up here in a second. She's going to present the report to you. That will be followed by a panel that Bill Viner will lead with some builders commenting and making their comments about the market. And we're going to have a short brokers roundtable of, I think we only have 2 or 3 people on the map. And I forgot something. Just prior to the brokers roundtable, we have the deal of the quarter, which we're going to have Mattamy Homes talk about their deal on Houghton Road they did with the city. So, Ginger has been in this community for quite a while. She has been with Bright Futures. She's the current owner, been with Bright Futures since 2000. She's known to be an unbelievable researcher, bright and creative, and one of her most creative moves ever was about 4 years ago. She came to work and fired John Strobeck and took over the company, and they're still friends, and she's moved on. So, no, but Ginger does a great job. We have a great report. And one thing I didn't know about Ginger is she's a licensed real estate agent and has done both commercial and real estate deals. So, Ginger, take it away.
Thank you for coming today. Got a lot to cover. I'm going to talk really fast. I'm going to try and keep it interesting for those of you who've seen some of this before. There's a lot of new things that I learned in preparing this report. 4 or 5 months ago, the Research Council engaged me to look at the question of what is a reasonable amount of, what is a reasonable expectation for new home development in our community. Basically, I think they were all sitting around saying, when are we going to hit 5,000 permits again? Because that's the question that I frequently hear. So they engaged us to answer that. Mike and I worked together. We talked to a lot of people in this room, a lot of members of the government, the development community, the home builders, trying to get a real well-rounded perspective on what the data tells us, but we want to know what the people tell us too. And that all is presented in a very long research paper that is available to you on the website for download. I would highly encourage you to do so because there are entire sections in that document that we aren't even going to touch on today. We just simply don't have time. I submitted my 30-minute presentation, and Paul Kraft sent it back and said, this is great. Add about 5 more slides to it, and it'll be perfect. So when I run over, he's not here, so I'm throwing him under the bus. It's his fault when you're still sitting here 30 minutes from now. I'm going to, as I said, talk very quickly, move through the content as quickly as I can, and I've told Mike to just cut me off and interrupt me when he has something to add, because he's as deep into this document as I am in terms of making sure that we get across to you the most important concepts that we don't want to miss out on. So our perspective is looking forward, and we want to be very forward-looking in how we approach development and home building in this market. But to do so, we do have to understand a few things that have changed in the market. And so we have to understand where we're at now, briefly understand how we got here, and then looking forward, what does that mean? What are the implications for moving forward? So the first thing we want to look at is what led us to where we're at today. And I think the best way to approach that is looking at the economic fundamentals. I choose job growth. We looked at household formation, job growth, population growth, all of those fundamental drivers of housing demand. We also took into account the active adult component of our market, because that, of course, is 20% of our market that we can't just ignore. So when I say these numbers and throw these out there, please understand that that active adult component is also in that thinking, okay? Because I think you're going to be surprised by a few of the numbers that I throw out. So when we look at the period of the decade of the 90s, we find that this time in here was actually where job growth and population growth and household formation were all increasing, and there was steady demand for housing. And in fact, what happens in that environment happened here. There was an undersupply. When I ran the model against the decade of the 90s, we entered the 2000s with an undersupply, not enough homes, of about 3,500, 4,000 homes. Okay, so we could not keep up with demand. Everyone thinks we couldn't keep up with demand at the peak of the market, but that's not really the case. When we moved past the short recession of the early 2000s, we entered another period, which was actually a period of oversupply. And I say that when you say supply was outpacing demand, you think, well, people were buying those homes, so wasn't that valid? There was demand for those homes. It was artificial demand. And there's a whole section in the report on financing, and I think that's highly relevant in terms of understanding that most of the buyer pool during that period of oversupply were not well-qualified buyers. I think we all understand that. And so moving forward, that supply was not absorbed properly. It wasn't bought by people who should have owned homes, essentially. And so then we move into this period of adjustment where just because the economy is shedding jobs does not mean that the home building industry goes to zero or we build negative homes. That's not possible. But that's, of course, what the model would imply when looking back at shedding jobs. We should have negative housing growth. So that's one of the limitations of looking back. It takes a long time for the new home market to adjust to that changing economy. The resale market is much more resilient to those changes than the new home market. We have to fire people and shed jobs as well and bring down our workforce and adjust how we do business in the new home side. So we have this period of adjustment. And then something changed right in here. In the last 5 or 6 years, we entered this period where all those homes that were not properly absorbed at the peak of the market had to be reabsorbed. So all of this that happened in that 2004 to 2008 period hit the resale market. These are not homes that should have been on the resale market. So we have the most highly competitive resale market in the history of Tucson in the last 10 years, last 8 years. I'll cut that short to 2008. Competing with a new home market that is confronted with rising development costs, rising land costs, and all of that. So there is hardly any way that the new home market can compete in that environment. At the same time as this flood of homes have been on the resale market, we see changes in the economic fundamentals. And this is probably the most important thing to remember as we look forward, is that things are different than they were in the past. In the 30 years leading up to the housing boom, population growth averaged about 3% every year. It has been less than 0.5% for many years now, and it is forecast to be half of the historical growth in the next 30 years, so 1.5% or less in terms of population growth. This is a huge change in demand for new homes. Huge change. So the relevance of the change in population growth cannot be understated. At the same time, household formation slowed. So the millennial generation, the missing demand from the millennial generation, where they're putting off buying houses, they have more debt than any other generation before. So at the time when we would have expected the next generation of home buyers to be seeping up from the bottom and filling that entry-level market and buying homes, it isn't happening to the extent that we would have expected, or to the extent that it has happened in previous generations. So there's a level of missing demand as well from that. We're also, as you will see, as we look through pricing and volumes, you will better understand, thank you, I appreciate that. We will better understand that right now we are asking entry-level buyers to climb to a higher rung on the economic ladder than ever before. They have higher debt, they have to achieve higher income in order to own a home, in order to make those debt-to-income ratios work. So they have to be better employed. So the traditional idea that the entry-level buyer is actually making less money and so they can only afford the smaller entry-level home is actually not holding true in this cycle. It's different. That was something that I found surprising, that now that entry-level buyer actually has to be better qualified and have a better paying job than at times in the past. So what does this look like for our volumes, our home sale volumes? So new home closings, we have the orange line on the bottom. Existing home closings, resales, are on the blue line at top. So this period right here is the period where the resale market has been capturing more of the demand. We see that demand has returned for home ownership, but the resale market has captured the lion's share of this demand in this new environment. So we look at the question overall of when is it going to be back to the way it was. So let's look at how we are doing in terms of recovering to pre-bubble levels. And I like to use 2003 because at that point we had moved through that early recession in the early 2000s, but the inflationary upward pressure that led us into the bubble had not yet really taken hold on the market. So I think 2003 is a little more reasonable place to look. So we see that the existing home market is on track and will likely get into that bracket this year, because I think this is at 2015. This is from last year. So the existing home market is on track. When we look at the new home market, we see it remains well below that performance, thus begging the question. Oh, Mike.
You know, let's translate a little bit of this. So you have a resale market, right? And it's oversupplied, prices go down, lenders take back properties, prices go down farther than maybe they even should have. And then you're a new home builder, you have to compete with, my cost is the land, plus the improvements, plus the building, plus I have to go to Wall Street and make a certain profit level or else they hand me my head. So therefore, that's why you have such a big digression between, it looks like there's a recovering market, and there is for the resale homes, but there's not a recovering market for the home builders. And by the way, since we're in Tucson, let's talk about the small home builders. Guess who got squeezed the most?
My next point is that in 2001, there were 188 builders that closed homes. 188. This year, there are 60. There's less than a third the number of home builders that were active in 2001. In 2001, there were 3 local home builders on that top 10 list. And that top 10 builder list accounted for 75% of the market. In this year, the list is fully consolidated to regional and national home builders. It is all about the national home builders, and they control 90% of the market. So when we talk about volume, the reason that it is highly relevant is because our market is now controlled by national and regional home builders. And so the way that they make decisions and their corporate structure is highly relevant in terms of buying land and how acquisitions take place and how we move forward. We can't ignore them. We can't pretend like what they do doesn't make sense, or that they're greedy, or their corporate structure is unreasonable, because that is our market for land, and they're also the ones who are most capable of building entry-level houses. So if we lose those builders, then our volumes really fall off the map, because they're the ones that are pushing for volumes. One of the exercises we went through in this research project was to look at other markets and how we compete with those markets, and the suspicion that, well, it's just more profitable to be in other markets because our land prices are more expensive, or they have a different composition of builders, builder profile, whatever it might be. What I learned in talking to people in 6 different markets of the Southwest, what I learned was that builders across all of these markets demand the same thing. They say the finished lot has to be about 20% of the value that I can achieve selling homes in that neighborhood. Okay? So that relationship between the value of the finished lot and the end home price is pretty much the same across all of these markets we think we're competing with. So the home price will rise as that land price rises. When I looked at these markets, the one that stands out, and no one will be surprised by that, is Austin. Austin has the most similar structure in terms of land ownership, land values, home prices, home values, as we do. What they have that we don't is 5 times the volume. So the linchpin of success is volume. That's why this matters, because without volume, when Richmond American or D.R. Horton go to their corporate structure to say, I want to buy this land, and here are all the reasons why, they are competing for money that can go to Austin, or money that can go to Denver, or money that can go to Salt Lake City, or money that can go anywhere else to buy homes. And do you think it's hard to sell the deal when it takes 5 times as long to sell that subdivision out here as it does in one of those other markets? That's why we care. That's why the volume is a problem. That's why it's relevant. The reason we look at this is price. Everyone knows this inherently. We've now switched sides where the new median price is up at the top in orange, and the blue line represents the resale median price. We see how those diverged greatly. They had followed somewhat of a close track over time, and then they diverged in 2009 really, where the new median price started to accelerate quickly as the move-up buyer came into the market and controlled most of the demand for the market. So the new home supplied that move-up and second move-up market, as it continues to do so. And the resale volumes were held back by foreclosures and short sales and such. So we look at the same idea of recovering to pre-bubble pricing. Let's look at the resale market. We see that it has exceeded that, and in fact, it is in the bracket where new median pricing was prior to the bubble. So when I look at this, I see that everything, is there a pointer on this? Yeah. Everything in this area here represents stuff that has to come back to the market at some point because it was not properly absorbed. It has not yet achieved its value back, because this blue line hasn't reached up into this realm here. Those homes are still underwater, or they've already come back and been absorbed in the resale market. So to better understand that, then, we look at the relationship between volume, which now we understand why it's so important, and pricing, which now we understand why it's very hard to compete in the new home market. This is a very busy graph that shows new home market share is the orange line. That is the total new homes we sell as a share of all the homes that we sell. So new home market share. And then what I call the price premium of a new home is this blue line. That is how much more are we asking people to pay to buy new. So it's the difference between median pricing in the resale and the new market. How much more do we say you have to pay to own a new home? And again, this model is on aggregate for the entire market. So we have to remember that there's certainly pockets that are more competitive and that price differential is less, as there are pockets where that price differential is greater. So we look and we see that over time, we can sell a lot of homes. And the new home industry can do quite well with volumes when we were in this price bracket where our pricing was 25 to 30% above that of a resale home. Okay? There's evidence that that is kind of the sweet spot for new homes. And I hear that evidence mirrored back to me when I talk to people in the home building industry, that that's kind of what they shoot for on the entry level side, on the move up and second move up. As you move up that ladder, you can push those limits higher. But nonetheless, that is where we achieve the most reasonable volumes of what the home builders are looking for in our market. Just when you think we're making progress over here, we've been between 50 and 60% above resale pricing in this recovery. And it looked like things were getting better, and I was talking about, hey, it's getting better. And then I ran the numbers for last month. And last month we had the highest median home price of any month ever recorded in Tucson, and the highest average home price. The average home price was, I think, $311. Or $320. It was right in that mid or low 300s. The price differential was $111,000, 66%. So it's not getting any better anytime soon.
Let's take a little bit of caution with those statistics, because this recovery wasn't hey, there's a bunch of new jobs and we've got new household formations. In terms of home pricing and the buyer profile, it's been a top-down recovery, just like it was in Phoenix and in a lot of other places. So the recovery was top-down, higher mid-band move-up prices rather than starter home prices. So there's a little bit of give in those statistics because of that factor.
All right, so let's move on. This kind of looks at our demand side and where we've been. I want to move on to the supply side, because the next question I get after when are we going to hit 5,000 permits is, what's our real finished lot inventory? Because that's the other thing everyone wants to know. When I talk about lot inventories, please understand I'm not counting active adult lots, because if we start counting all the Robeson lots and the Del Webb lots, it skews the numbers in a direction that don't make sense for what we're trying to achieve here in understanding. Now, certainly some of the lots that are included in these counts could be active adult lots, and I think a lot of builders are looking at that market because that market is recovering so strongly. But these numbers do not include the Robeson and Del Webb holdings, okay? Just so we're clear. So what I did was I looked at what's under lot development, what is going to be delivered in the near term, in the next 6 months, to count as finished lots. I count those as finished. And I come up with 4,000. There's going to be about 3,300 lots in open selling subdivisions for the next selling season, or in the next year. And then there's about 700 more lots that are finished. And when I say finished, my interpretation of finished is not there's a road in front of the lot. My interpretation of finished is that a builder can buy the lots and start construction in 30 to 45 days. So there's more of a quick delivery. Not just the road has been there for 50 years, and so we count it as finished. So that's my look at finished lots. This, when I ran through the numbers, this is about a 2-year supply. And that's based on looking at, I kind of looked at sub-market and absorption levels based on product for how quickly things absorb based on pricing and that sort of thing. So it's about a 2-year supply. The most important thing to remember about this bag of finished lots that we have right now that are going to be active is that there's balance in these lots. Some of these lots represent lots that were finished in the last cycle, that have been finished for years. They represent plats that were done 10 years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago. They represent costs that were incurred a long time ago, sunk costs maybe, as well as new lots, newly developed lots. So there's still some balance in this finished lot supply. There's still some balance where the lots weren't quite as expensive as they are moving forward. And that allows us to still supply some entry-level housing priced under $250,000. And I should have made, the one point I did miss now I think is on the last slide, is that keep in mind that 75% of our resale homes sell under $250,000. The next level of supply should theoretically come from the platted and engineered inventory. I did not include about 2,500 or more lots on the west side of the Tucson Mountains. I don't think they're relevant for the horizon of this study. Maybe if an I-11 corridor gets built, they will be relevant. Well, not maybe, they will be. But right now, they're not relevant. So these platted and engineered lots are at kind of a higher level of cost basis, you might say. The biggest issue with these lots is that many of them are older plats that require replatting, that do not reflect today's subdivision standards. So they don't have a provision for a community park. The lot setbacks are different than what they would be in today's market, the lot widths, that kind of thing. So they don't reflect today's standards. So you think that, oh, it's a P&E lot, it's ready, let's get construction drawings and move forward. It may not be that simple. Many of them will require that extra layer of cost, which adds on to the final cost of the home. And that's where all the costs end up. Let's not pretend otherwise. All the final costs end up in the lap of the home buyer. All right? And then we move on. The next level of development of supply, lot supply, should come from what's being planned and what has been entitled right now, what we look at. Now, 74,000 seems like a big number, right? Well, about 20,000 of those lots are covered with pecan groves. And if you've bought pecans lately, you know that that's a highly lucrative crop. So the demand for the cost, the land value to the landowner of that property is much higher than the land value of open desert or a cotton field. So I think you can kind of take those 20,000 right off the bat, take those out. And then we have, in this entitlement, we have a lot of things in Marana that were entitled in the last cycle, and as well as things that are currently being worked on. The research document breaks down all of these lot inventories by submarket and project. Lots of specifics in there. So I'm trying to avoid going into the depth of analysis of the specific submarket points, but it is all in the research document. So you should download it and look at it and see what this looks like on a submarket by submarket basis.
When you have millennials who are driving, are not participating in the auto-centric society to the same degree that my generation did, they want to live closer in, and yet you have a whole bunch of lots that are ex-urban, okay, outside. You have higher demand for central and closer in without the supply, and so you have this weird constraint of here's where this should go, and this is not what the market wants.
He's absolutely right. And speaking of this is where it should go, the elephant in the room, of course, is always state land. Again, we're looking at a time horizon of about 15 years on this study, 15 to 20 years. I talked to a lot of people about the state land issue, and my takeaway from this is, and maybe wrong or right, I don't know, my personal takeaway on state land is that Maricopa County is highly lucrative for the state land department. They are not given to releasing lots and lots of land at one time, and so they are going to release land where it is the most lucrative, and that is in Maricopa County, whether we like it or not. Our constraints our supply side issues have not become relevant enough to make that land more valuable. What I see as generating interest from the state land department in selling off large blocks of land would be the municipalities putting zoning and entitling those parcels so that they have more value, so that the state land department can look at it and say, this now is more valuable and we can achieve the numbers we need to achieve in order for this sale to make sense. The areas, there are not very many areas where that will make sense. The only, as I see it, my perspective is that the areas where that makes sense are the Southeast Houghton Road Corridor and the Tangerine Corridor. And that is because those are areas of limited supply and high demand. The Southeast submarket, one of the parts of this study, I went back and I took a snapshot of 96, 2001, 2005, or 2006, and 2011 and 2016 as to the submarket's demand. So market share by submarket. The Southeast submarket is the only one that consistently had high demand through every time frame, at every point in time. Others went rise and fall, but the Southeast submarket maintained that high demand throughout. It has proven demand. The Tortolita submarket has proven demand at higher price levels. And so that land, therefore, becomes more valuable from the perspective of the State Land Department because they have demonstrated that they can bring in home buyers at higher price points. So that is my perspective on the relevance of where state land fits into this picture of lots. All right? So our concern now, we understand what we've got for lots. We have prices that are a little high. The underlying driver of this, of course, is finishing the lots. So I want to talk briefly about how that relationship between home prices and finished lot prices. And I want to say that this was probably one of the most difficult parts of the study to come together for us, because it is very difficult to make broad generalizations about the market. Everything differs so greatly on the terrain and the submarket and the final home price you can put on it. The caliber of improvements, whether you're building 60 lots out in the middle of the desert or you're building 200 lots in Dove Mountain. You know, it's all very, very different. And so please understand that we have taken development costs of today and we're trying to look forward at what this looks like in 2 years when we've burned through the finished lot inventory. So this is forward looking, so you better understand where the market sits, okay? And again, we've done our best to provide averages. It's hard for Mike's an appraiser, and I like hard numbers, and it's hard for us to provide broad generalizations. We don't like that. We like hard numbers.
So what she's really saying is, I really argued for wider ranges and things like that, and she really pushed me hard on this. But the ranges are really way bigger, because if you're looking at a subdivision, I mean, interject grading, interject drainage, interject pricing models. I mean, it goes all over. It goes all over the place. So this really should be taken with a grain of salt. And by the way, the participants do things. Everybody does things differently. The builders talk about price per front foot. The contractors that build the lots talk about, hey, what's the quantity takeoff and what's my profit margin, et cetera, and is there anything weird in the subdivision? So you have all sorts of different factors that come into this that make doing this really, the ranges should be broader, but I deferred to my colleague.
We come up with an average lot cost of $30,000 to $45,000 average lot cost. That's just for the platted and engineered lots, the value of the land plus the value of the plat and engineer. We're seeing a lot of takedown at the lower end of this bracket, and of course it's pushed higher in the upper as we move into different higher price submarkets. Lot improvement cost, this was a really broad range. Narrowing it down to $700 to $750 was the best we could do to come up with a number at the end of the day. And then that gives us a finished lot cost in that range of $55 to $70. And again, we're looking moving forward, that's where the market is. $1,100 to $1,400 a front foot. And that makes your head hurt. I know, it makes my head hurt. I know I see a lot of people in this room whose head hurts thinking about that. The home builders, as I mentioned, use this 20% land value. So if you have to pay that for a lot, you have to build homes in this $275,000 to $350,000 price range. This speaks to our challenges in delivering entry-level homes in this market. If we are to build where the greatest demand is in this market at that entry-level phase, then we have to have lower pricing. This pricing does not reflect entry-level pricing in our market. And so as long as this is where the price bracket is, the volumes will continue to be low. I took the median household income for Tucson and ran it through the Zillow affordability calculator, basic as you get, right? And the number that it spit out was $177,000. So there's a big gap between what where the market is at for the large volume of homes in pricing, and what the value of a lot is to an owner and developer, what the costs are that make it very expensive to get to that range. So that's our concern moving forward.
So if you're a landowner and you're a home builder, so here's the other factor that we didn't really address in a big way in the report, and that is the material costs are increasing. There's a shortage. Tucson's competing with Phoenix and a whole bunch of other places for labor costs, and good contractor labor costs. I mean, laborers are in shortage. I mean, that's a complaint in Phoenix, for example. So you've got rising material prices, shortage of labor, and so that's pushing a builder's prices upward. And she just said, we got to go down.
The report goes into a lot of detail about, our vision, what we see, where the opportunity is. I first wanted to talk a little bit about what I hope will happen that could redirect some of this. The things that make me hopeful was, one thing I really learned in this was there is an unprecedented level of cooperation among economic development officials in this town right now. And as those of you who know me know, I am extremely skeptical and negative, relatively negative. And and so I asked about 6 different people, as many different ways as I could, to get to the point of what's different now than 20, 25 years ago? Why does this look any different? And repeatedly it was conveyed to me that it is different, that people get it, that the people who are working to bringing jobs to this community get it in a way that has not been present in the past, we should say. And not only do they get it, but they also get that they have to work together, that it's not a municipality by municipality race to bring jobs here. It's a coordinated effort that pools all of the resources in the community to bring the jobs here. And so I am hopeful that this effort among the local officials that does appear to be different than in the past will result in the job growth we need at all economic levels, particularly the higher paying jobs that will help support those higher home prices. It takes a long time for that growth, that job growth and those higher paying jobs to trickle through the economy to be reflected in the numbers. So it will take time before we really see that come to fruition. But I think there's a lot of positive momentum in that direction that I started working for Tim Prouty in 1996. And so it hurts my head to see Kevin Prouty here. Wow. So in 20 years, the environment didn't seem to change. The landscape and economic development did not seem to change for a long time. But it is. And I really do believe that it is changing. But it will take time for that to result in higher median incomes and supporting those higher home prices. We also we have to see price appreciation in the resale market. So you see numbers come out. I think TR is at about 6% in terms of foreclosure volume. my numbers track foreclosures as well as investor sales of distressed properties. So when investors buy, I look at it no different. If an investor buys it at the courtroom steps or the bank takes it back, it's all the same distress to me. So I'm looking at distress levels in the market, and they're still 11 to 14%, whereas going back to the early 2000s and late 90s, those levels were less than 5%, well below 5%. So that level of distress is still impacting the ability of the resale market to achieve appreciation. So it's really, that is what will be a fundamental shift in as we see some rising in narrowing of that gap from the bottom up as well. I'm hopeful that that all happens before we lose one of our national home builders. Because if you think it's hard to deliver entry-level homes for the national home builders, it's even harder to deliver entry-level homes en masse, in great volumes for the local home builder. They do not have the capital. They've been shut out of this recovery by and large, and they do not have the capital to take down they do not have the economies of scale that the larger volume builders have and such. So losing one of our top 10 regional national builders would effectively negate any progress that was made on any other front in terms of balancing out the market with entry-level product. The opportunity and the areas of opportunity that I see, I think that Mr. Viner and his partners did an exceptional job with what they did at Park Modern. I think that we have to look at where a student graduating from the University of Arizona wants to live. Do they want to move up to an apartment in Oro Valley? Do they want to get a high-paying job and buy a house? Where are they at? And to keep those people here, we have to address our aging housing stock. We have an aging housing stock in the core. We have very little opportunity for new home ownership. When homes are built, it's by and large developing duplex properties for rent rather than home ownership opportunities. So we have to address this infill aging housing stock, and it has to be done in a meaningful way that says let's have a vision for what we want this area to look like and not be so concerned about what the comprehensive plan says and the land use plan and the zoning and the setback requirements and all of these layers of bureaucracy that we get tied up in. We've got to step back and say, what do our buyers want and how do we deliver it? And working with the municipalities to do so. I think that there has to be better cooperation with the municipalities so that they also can speak to what their vision is for our community and work with the home builders in order to make a less divisive environment in terms of achieving what we want to achieve. Mike.
Here's what I'd really like to see. In terms of the government, I'd like the government to try to allow the development community more, not less flexibility, not more rigidity, but more flexibility. Things like where you can move, where you can do something with design, because we have if you want to sell new product, there's a coming up generation. They have different expectations. How about we encourage ourselves to be successful and allow flexibility to accommodate their wants and needs with a broader based product. But it also starts with in terms of when a builder comes to the table at the government and says, I want a permit, you have to process this through quickly, because you're competing with other municipalities, and just like TJ Maxx competes with Amazon nowadays, everybody's becoming a logistics company. How do you get from point A to point Z and get the sale? Well, the same thing happens with real estate development. If it takes too long, the developer goes broke, the national home builder exits the community, the local builder folds up his tent and goes to work somewhere else. Lots of bad things happen, but there's an opportunity here for really good things. But we have to allow flexibility. We have to basically challenge ourselves to create designs and amenities that the next generation really wants, and that's going to be an opportunity for us to be even more successful than we have been.
Something that I feel has happened with those communities that have come of age is they have taken the politicization out of the process, and the people who work for those municipalities have been given the latitude to make decisions. And so when all the boxes are checked and it goes before the governing body of elected officials for final approval, there is reasonable confidence that it's not going to be sent back for another neighborhood meeting or for another review or for another something. There is significantly less politicization of the process and more trust in the staff members to move things through the process and check the boxes, rather than everything becoming a political football where the developers never know if they've actually met all the requirements, because you don't know till you go before council. You don't know until it's been before the governing body. So I think that is also something that I believe characterizes these other competing Southwest cities.
Instead of the attitude of, I'm going to find the problems in this plan, or I'm going to complain about the bureaucrat, what we challenge each other to do is, from the public side, we give the development community excellent service, and we expect them to provide the best product we possibly can provide. And on the flip side, that's what we give them. We give them the best product we can provide. It's not sloppy. It doesn't take extra time for them, and it helps everything go fast. It helps everything move faster in a more productive, in a more positive attitudinal way.
We have to look at the cost of infrastructure and how we build those lots. And there is a lot of room for public-private partnerships to get that done. The use of a CFD, community financing district, is becoming more common among developers in order to get it done. The reality is that there is not the financing available to finish these big master plan communities that was available 15 years ago. It's a very different landscape. And so the financing mechanism for getting this done has to also be different. And I hope that's one of the big takeaways that you'll come away from, is I don't think that the question of when are we going to get back to the permit volumes of whenever, the heyday, whatever it might be in our heads. I think the reality is the world has changed, and we need to move forward within our new reality and what it looks like, and not base our expectations of the future on where things were 30 years prior to the housing boom. That's one of the big things I hope that you'll take away from this. And I think we've kind of covered the less prescriptive approach to development, where there is a less adversarial tone in the relationship between public and private, where I think that we can all agree that the less regulatory environment we live in, the lower home prices will be. That is something that only serves to push home prices higher at the end of the day. So I'm going to give Mike before I give you my final number, I'm going to give Mike one last shot. Anything we missed? Anything you want to throw in?
First of all, the overwhelming majority of this report is the credit goes to her. It was actually a privilege to work with her. She's really smart. I actually learned a lot working with her, and we had a lot of conversations. And I hope as a community we realize what an asset she is in terms of her, of the data that she provides. It helps us make better decisions. And like I said, my participation, I feel, was certainly far less significant than hers. And it was really awesome working with you. I really appreciate it.
I felt very privileged. We were a good team and got a lot done. So with all of that said, I'm going to tell you that based on all of the economic development changes, the economic fundamentals that are different, based on the value of lots, the lot costs, home prices, changes in demand, changes in supply, everything that I looked at when I ran numbers against it, a reasonable estimate for the next 15 years is an average volume of 4,000 to 4,500 permits. Well, that's over 15 years, so you run up into that and then you exceed it, but it is that's an average volume. We simply cannot achieve the volumes of the past if we are not supplying our entry-level market. It's simply not possible. So in the absence of change in that $200,000 to $300,000 price range, whether it's lot delivery, home prices, you know, resale market, whatever it might be, that's my expectation for what the future holds for us.